how do we impact the communities around us? I mean, we've seen that this year. Brownouts, rolling blackouts, temperatures rising, that all kind of correlates to the power demand from the facilities, but also the power demands that we have, for our homes, for our schools, for our medical facilities. We've got to be able to balance a lot of that, and a lot of the onus is coming onto the data centers right now.
All right, welcome to another edition of Not Your Father's Data Center. I'm Raymond Hawkins, your host, Chief Customer Officer at Compass. Today, we are joined by our friends, and our friend in particular, Miranda Gardiner from the iMasons Climate Accord. Miranda, welcome. Thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here today.
Before we get into how data centers are saving the planet, which I know everyone wants to hear about, visceral reaction, we talked about that. We want to try to produce some of those. Before we get into that, let's hear about you. So, Miranda, you go back as far as you're willing. I'd love to hear about pre-Georgetown days, but you take us back as far as you'd like to take us. We want to understand what makes you you, and how long have you cared about our planet and its sustainability, and how'd you get into that as a career?
Great question. Always love to dig into the past in some ways, obviously. But, we were talking about this a little bit before we got going. I grew up all over the world. And so to see that and have that context, from living in Iowa when I was a kid to Germany to, really my roots in San Francisco, I think caring about the planet has just kind of inherently been part of my approach to life. I remember going to recycling facilities as a kid and sorting, the brown and the green glass, which we don't do anymore. I have a yearbook photo from when I'm a kid that indicates what are your plans for the future? And under my photo, it says there would be no pollution and everyone would have a home. Even in high school, and I went to a tech arts high school, some of the projects that I developed or designed, even as a teenager, were things like low-income modular housing, looking at site selection when it came to larger projects and what the ecosystem around the building kind of had an impact on the design and the functionality of it. So I sort of steered clear of it or went a different way when I went to Georgetown. They don't have an architecture school. I, explored writing and creative arts and my German background, kind of exploring languages and literature, and then really started to get back into it in graduate school and pursued a master's of architecture. Did 1 year designing, and then about 16, 17 years ago was like, no, I want to get involved with the planet. And so worked for U.S. Green Building Council, helped develop the lead technical kind of side of some of the rating systems that you now see out there in their version 5. So the 2009 version, the version 4, lead for healthcare, lead for retail, development of that expanded. I then got to go again back across the world. So Abu Dhabi, Vancouver, Germany, Greece, supporting rating systems, supporting development of criteria, and really having a hand in sustainable conversations across every industry. I know we're talking data centers today, but I've seen, an airport in Iqaluit, which is like the northernmost point in Canada, and how we work sustainability into that. And then ones across the globe in terms of Australia, everywhere in between. So it's really been, for me, a very exciting marriage of that kind of international approach to things and different people in different places, and then really getting into how data centers function and using the functionality of it to drive the sustainability initiatives.
So tell me two things. Where do you consider home with all that
right
travel?
Now,
where's home?
So home,
but home for
me,
you, it's time to eat Thanksgiving dinner and you're ready to sit down with the family. Where's home? Where do you want that to happen in a perfect world?
Well, I mean, home is where the heart is. So, and my heart lives in California. My family is still in San Francisco. I live in Southern California now with my boyfriend and his son.
I gotcha. So you guys head up the coast and go to NoCal for Thanksgiving or those kinds of things. That's home. Gotcha. All right.
We do. We also have a little bit of home and heart in Ohio, which is where he's from. So we won't go down to college football this guy.
Come on. We can talk about Ohio State. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. My formative
years were in Dayton, Ohio. Come
okay.
On.
There we go. He is from outside of Cleveland, but he is gone to and is a very much an Ohio State Buckeye. Sorry, the Ohio State.
That's right. We don't want to get either of us in trouble. The Ohio State University. That's right.
Yes.
Well, very good. All right. Well, so he enjoyed his weekend as we are recording here in the middle of week 1 of college football season, headed into week 2. So he enjoyed beating Texas, I'm sure.
He enjoyed his weekend. He's enjoyed the last year. We were at
Yeah.
the Rose Bowl. We saw that domination of Oregon in that second game. So yeah,
Yeah. Fun
very much
stuff.
so.
And with all of that travel, where do you say, that was the neatest place? Doesn't have to be, hey, this is where I want to live, but man, it was fascinating to see Australia. It was incredible to be in Germany. I loved Greece. But where's the place that you really go, that stood out? I want to go back there as often as I can.
Oh man, a great question. And you can't see it right now. I do have a tattoo on my arm. It's 16 map coordinates of all the places I've lived. So that just gives you a sense of how far I've taken my travels and go to. Oh man.
One's got us. If you can't pick one, pick 3. Give us 2. Something stood out everywhere.
Sure, I can pick a few for you. My dad is originally from New York State. Grew up in Long Island in upstate New York. The Adirondacks and the Catskills always hold a place in my heart because it's just so beautiful to go up there, go hiking, be there. I've been to Lake George a couple of times, so love going back and visiting family and having that time there. So I would say a lot of it has to do, maybe you're surrounded by nature and stuff. So there was a trip that I took to Austria by myself, like showed up on a train, took a bus out to this random hike, climbed up, and then it was all alone. And it was just like, you could see the snow and you could see this glacier lake. And then you come hiking back down and you get to go swim in the lake. And then you hop the bus back to town. And it was like one of those spiritual moments of like, I think for me, this is why I do what I do. It's like to save and preserve places like this that exist in the world was really, really stunning, really amazing. I would say maybe the last one was I got to go surf in Sri Lanka.
That's a good one. Yeah.
It was really fun, really cool. You get to just meet. My friend and I stayed in a random hostel. Like you just get to meet so many different people. You get to get out there and surf, you eat all the local food, like just a really special place. Got to go see some of the wildlife there. And again, you're all the way across the world. So it gives you a lot of perspective on your own life. Literally the other side of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my previous teammates is from Sri Lanka. And it was, every time he'd go home, he's like, okay, it's 24 hours of flying, right? It is a long trip away, quite literally halfway around the world. Well, the Adirondacks, that's a great answer. Certainly love that. Were the hills alive with the sound of music in Austria? I've always wondered that. That's what the movie says.
It certainly felt like it. Someday I'll share the photo because there's like some crosses you can see too. And again, then you can see the mountains and then you can see, so it's like all of the above you can see.
Yeah. Pretty incredible stuff and very cool. And surfing, anytime I get to surf, I'm terrible at it. I've got terrible surfing stories. I go to Hawaii and I get my surfing lessons and, they put me on a surfboard about the size of a pickup truck. And, I get up the very first time and I'm like, I was born to surf. I'm so good at this. I'm an amazing surfer. And, I'm probably surfing on 4 or 5 inches. So after, doing it twice, I come back to the instructor and I'm like, why are you riding a pencil? And why am I riding a pickup truck? Give me that pencil. And he slid the pencil over to me and I literally couldn't sit on it. Forget get up and surf on it. I just couldn't get it to sit. I'm like, oh, okay. Give me the pickup truck size surfboard back. Very humbling to try to surf. And you watch the people that are good at it and you're like, wow, that's a lot of balance and a lot of practice. And now I think about the guys that surf walls of water, just unbelievable.
I mean, really amazing to see that. I've surfed in Sri Lanka, I've surfed in Morocco, I've surfed obviously in California. I would say actually, arguably the hardest place I tried to was the Jersey Shore because that break is really short.
Yeah.
So like trains that you cannot ride anything in. But, I was reading an article one time about a woman who talks about like going on vacations and how much she likes to surf. And she's like, same thing. I'm terrible at it. She's like, but I love doing it. And she's like, so what? Go do it. If you love doing this, probably 95% of the people more than are terrible surfers.
I love it and I'm terrible. So I'm comfortable with both of those. I love it and I am terrible.
And I'm terrible.
But
okay.
It is something I do every time I go to Hawaii. I'm like, I'm getting in the ocean and surfing, but I'm still no good. All right. So awesome to hear a little bit about your background. I do have one just kindred spirit background. So let's go all the way back to when I was in the 6th grade. So about 10 years ago. Maybe 15. And we had science fair And my science fair project in the 6th grade was, how do we capture the energy from lightning strikes? As we have to power this planet and let's worry about how we're going to power it, can't we capture the energy from lightning strikes? So I did this Van de Graaff generator to synthesize lightning strikes. And how do you position, where would you position the equipment to capture it? How do you capture it? How long can you hold it? Do you put it in giant capacitors or do you put it in batteries? Yeah, so funny. I was having similar thoughts, but as a young kid of wondering, hey, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get all this power? But boy, do our power needs look a lot different than they did when I was in the 6th grade.
They do.
The world is going nuts.
Just
needing
a little.
Power.
Yeah.
So tell me how you got to iMasons and tell me how you got in this specific role. And let's talk about what this means for our industry and for our planet both.
Yeah. Maybe a little fortuitous how I got into this role. I had a great consultant who I've worked with for quite a number of years. They still work with me for the iMasons and the Brightwork sustainability team. You know, there were some shifts in what was going on at my company. And they sort of called me and said, hey, we think we have your new role for you. We think you're the right fit for this. And about 6 weeks later, I started this role at the iMasons Climate Accord just over 2.5 years ago now. So they knew something that I didn't know, which was really great and really great to see that evolution of not only my career, but the relationship with them. And again, their expertise in terms of how it's influenced me and what they saw me bring to the table. So I can't say enough in terms of appreciation for that phone call from them and how they got me here. You know, the Climate Accord at that point had been around, give or take a year or so. It launched in April of 22. The iMasons founder and chairman of the board, I think still, Dean Nelson and Christian Bellotti, formerly of Microsoft, announced it at Data Cloud Global Congress that year in Monaco. 73 companies had signed up. So when I sort of took the helm, there were, I think, over 100 companies at that point. So the first part was just kind of getting to know them and giving phone calls to every single one of them. Hi, who are you? Who am I? Maybe similar to the conversation we're having today of, you know, what's driving you? Why are you here? How can the Climate Accord?
Do they understand your passion for surfing? That's important. I just don't know if they know that, but they will now after this gets released.
Yeah, they will. No, but they did know my passion for trail running. I know we didn't talk about that, but like 2 weeks or 3 weeks into my stint, I've done a trail race called the Trans Rockies Trail Race. It's a 6-day stage race, 120 miles. And so I kind of started and then took off for a week off the grid and was like, bye. So they all knew that very quickly to know what kind of a crazy
like the
person I
Colorado
am.
Mountains. The Colorado Mountains are incredible. I do a race called Ride the Rockies.
Yeah.
So it's a week-long tour on a bike, but it's, especially if you're from Texas where it's pancake flat, you go to Colorado and ride a bike and you're like, oh, we have hills. These are mountains. There's a big difference. They're real mountains out there. Yeah, they're mountains.
Yeah. And that race does the thing of like goes up and over Hope's Pass. So you're going straight up and over and Continental Valley. You're climbing up the backside of Vail and then coming down the Bulls. Like
Trail Ridge Road, all that stuff. It's brutal. It's a lot of time going uphill. It's tough.
It is.
You know? All right, I will wander us off into trails like that. All right, so you're iMason Climate Accord. You're calling all the companies. Christian and Dean have stood this thing up, and tell me what the early days for you. It's been up for a year, but you're just getting there. Tell me what the charter was and what you're doing now.
First point of initiation for anyone joining the Climate Accord was like, you are committed to a collaborative journey on decarbonization. We're looking at how this industry can kind of take sustainability almost to a new level. Where is a really kind of pinpoint moment / area of focus that we can take the lead on, that we haven't seen coming out of other organizations, or just kind of, again, a collective action towards it. And so, that has been still the driving focus. We've refined a little bit of it over the years to highlight more specific objectives when companies join us. Those members are companies on the Climate Accord side. And so looking at, one, what is the strategy for your climate reduction goals? 2, looking at what your purchasing is. So how can you be a responsible purchaser? Are you looking at things like a life cycle assessment? Are you looking at things like an environmental product declaration, an EPD, et cetera, right? Like just being more kind of hands-on in that criteria selection process. And then similarly, what are you putting back out into the world? What are you selling? What are your goods, whether it's online services or actual physical goods? Because we have a number of vendors in the space too. So kind of that threefold approach to the areas that then are in the climate accord. Also 3 of them magically, right? We're looking at power, source power for our facilities, where they come in, where it goes out, how we're kind of operating. The second piece is looking at the materials, both building materials, so the brick and mortar of the facilities, but also the materials that go into our equipment. And then third is the equipment. So both IT and MEP. Again, what's operating now these facilities and keeping them up and running. So those were kind of the big picture goals that were given to me from the jump. We had some working groups stood up. We have a governing body that includes 4 hyperscalers. So AWS, Meta, Google, Microsoft, obviously all there, all have very ambitious targets when it comes to climate change. And then a co-location facility. So Digital Realty. And then on the vendor side, Schneider Electric. And so kind of a nice cross section of those involved.
And those 6 make up what? What are those 6 there?
Those 6 make up the governing body of the
governing body. Okay.
So effectively like my board, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, let's go through all 3. Let's start with, and we might start and we might come back and end with it. Let's start with how we get all the power because, so I've been in the data center business, digital infrastructure business for about 11 years. And I remember when we talked about big deals that were 250 kilowatts and I didn't stumble, 250 kilowatts were big deals 11 years ago, right? And now we talk about gigawatts kind of like it's no big deal, right? Oh yeah, I need a gig in Oklahoma. Hey, can you give me a gig in southern Montana? So in just a decade, the business has grown exponentially, which means the demand on power has grown exponentially. So I'd love to hear from the Climate Accord's perspective, A, about the growth, but B, hey, where are we going to get all this power?
I don't know if we can even get into how much growth is going on. And mostly because, those pillars that I just outlined move at very different paces when it comes to different industries. You talk construction. Construction is decades, if not centuries old in terms of practice, moving that needle on how we actually deliver from a GC side, very different than how the data centers are, to your point, moving at an exponential pace. So bringing it back to power, though, some of the dialogues and conversations between those experts. So we have working groups in all of these areas. They're made up and comprised of that cross section of membership. So we have, power players in the room. We have owner operators in the room. We have those that are kind of delivering on like cabling and networks. We have somebody like a representative from CEBA, so the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, involved in that space. So we have a lot of strategic alliances. Hey, if they're doing this, how can we lean in and be the data center voice in their conversations and really kind of facilitate that kind of expertise in areas that maybe right now just haven't seen it or have enough of it? Because, yes, we're a big industry. We still have a much shorter timeline on who's out there and who can talk to other experts about the work that we do. So some of what they're working on is kind of the financial benefits of cleaner power when we're cleaning the grid, greening the grid. They have a case study out about, heat reuse. So how do we impact the communities around us? I mean, we've seen that this year, brownouts, rolling blackouts, temperatures rising. That all kind of correlates to the power demand from the facilities, but also the power demands that we have for our homes, for our schools, for our medical facilities. We've got to be able to balance a lot of that. And a lot of the onus is coming onto the data centers right now, partially through media, partially because we have a huge demand need for the amount of power that we need for the facilities. They also released a case study last year, the challenges and the benefits of nuclear power. That's a conversation hot on most people's minds, including our administration, our federal administration, as well as governments across the world, how nuclear is now, that conversation is shifting and how we're looking at things like small modular reactors, how we're looking at things like 3 Mile Island potentially coming back online, other facilities, because when it comes to a carbon conversation, nuclear power really is the cleanest in carbon emissions themselves. Talking about the bridging solutions that are going on. We've seen, over the last week, China's firing up more coal plants. We're the conversations around natural gas. Those things are all coming back into an energy mix that still needs transition. What does that transition timeline look like? How do we, again, marry the demand need with the actual fuel type and what it can actually do? Solar cannot be enough for a data center facility, right? It's just doing rooftop solar. And this is a conversation I have a lot with sustainability professionals. Like, I don't get it. Just throw solar up. And you're like, yeah, do you know the percentage of offset there? Maybe a percentage. Like, that doesn't make sense. It could make sense, though, again, for a neighborhood nearby, or again, other facilities to support the balance that we need to see. So that's really where the power group is kind of headed, but also has focused. They're looking at policy changes that are happening across the world. They're looking, again, at different ways users and providers can balance load, so load shifting opportunities. They get into, I would say, the most kind of diverse conversation that I've seen when it comes to that.
All of the hyperscalers have announced nuclear projects, and I think that helps. You mentioned it, it being from a scale and carbon-free answer. I personally did not know. I'm just one data center developer in the wilderness. I don't know how we're going to get enough power, and we're going to get enough power that's clean if we don't embrace nuclear. And by embrace meaning, hey, we got to entitle these things in less than 15 years. Right, we need to entitle these things in 2 or 3 years because the demand's not going away. And one thing I'd love to get yours and the Climate Accord's take on, as a data center company and as a data center industry, we're just providing the service for the digital infrastructure that the world is clamoring for. Right? I didn't stand up a data center so I could do something with it. We stood up a data center so that all of the services that people want, right? They want to be able to order pizza that shows up at their house off of their Domino's app. They want to be able to call an Uber so they can get home from the pub. They want to be able to order their plane tickets with their thumb. They don't want to have to talk to anybody. All of those things happen in a data center somewhere. And as we get more and more and more comfortable with digital interaction, I mean, we got to power it. We got to power it somehow, and we're not going to do it, with biofuels or solar panels as you described, right? I mean, I can't put, my roof ain't big enough. I can't put enough of them up there, and unfortunately, the sun goes down at night, and you want to be able to buy pizza at 11 o'clock at night, and unless we're in the facility you talk about in northern Canada in July, there won't be sun shining at 11 o'clock at night. So yeah, I am excited about the nuclear future. I recognize that there has a little bit of a stigma attached to it. But when I think about how our industry serves the planet, I think us leading the way as an industry in nuclear is a big step in the right direction.
Yeah. In some ways, I think it's a dated perception of nuclear. Nuclear has really evolved over the last couple of decades, over the last, kind of major incidents that have been, front page news. That technology, the safety issues, all of that has changed dramatically. And so the perception of nuclear and what nuclear actually is still needs to be conveyed into the market, because, I see it and I hear that. And yes, there's some of it I agree with. Yes, it is very scary to see a facility melt down and the damage it does. Same time, you've also seen oil spills in gulfs and the wildlife that destroys. You've seen electrical fires just take off and run rampant. And now, I live here in Los Angeles.
I was going to say, California, you guys are super sensitive to it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Front and center, my backyard, that was my view out my window, the fires this last January. So, I mean, these things are happening at scales and magnitudes that, sometimes as a human, that's hard to just embrace because it's very scary. It's very all consuming. And so, you always kind of need a baddie on the block to point a finger at. I think nuclear still gets the brunt of that, but it's not to say that other sources of power don't have their pros and cons too. I mean, even solar panels, where are we sourcing all the materials for solar panels? Those are coming from areas where labor issues are really a problem. The human capital that it costs to get cobalt is really severe. The damage that does, the processing of those facilities, again, damaging to the planet. So a lot of this is looking at the trade-offs, looking how we can be more efficient. And yes, solar and wind aren't doing it right now. I always like to challenge, especially this industry too. You guys are innovators. You're at the forefront of tech. Let's evolve these, opportunities here. Like I've heard that sentiment on solar for so long. Why hasn't someone made it more efficient? Where is the hang up that we're not seeing that move faster, because we do need that power and we do need that source of power. But, there has been a lot of development. I know Texas, I think was the number one solar provider over the last couple of years. So, things are going in the direction we need them to go. We need them to scale, I guess, maybe at the speed that data centers are scaling at this point.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was going. Our industry is incredibly power hungry, and we got to get generation that can keep up, because we're moving projects now to where the generation is, because that's the long pole in the tent today.
And to that point, if we go in now to kind of materials and equipment, right?
Yeah, that's where I was going next.
There's also stalls though in our supply chain. Resources are not infinite. And yes, power is front and center in the conversation, but getting some of this stuff, the materials, again, the equipment, where it's coming from, maybe we don't go down this rabbit hole today, but, tariffs, the kind of global tariff conversation that's happening right now, or actually implementation of tariffs, that is going to create a bunch of stalls. So you may be able, hypothetically, you get power online, you may not have the resource to actually build that facility. You may not get the equipment because it's stalled at customs. So there are a lot of things that are really weighing on how this industry is going to continue the growth it's got.
Yeah. And I look at the scale of the projects right now, Miranda, right? Let's look at the OpenAI project out in Abilene, Texas. When you talk about materials and you talk about transportation, the scale of that project, the amount of stuff that's got to get out to Abilene, it's staggering, thinking about your second pillar materials and your third pillar equipment, right? It is unbelievable, the scale of what's getting built out there and the amount of material required transporting that material. And your comment about the efficiency of the equipment coming and where the equipment comes from. It is no small task balancing all three of those parts, for sure.
And then the shift in technology, right? We've seen that happen too. So how your cooling or how your, racks are being sized, or the facilities are being sized and kind of calculated for live loads or stagnant loads, that has all changed. I've had that conversation with concrete suppliers, or again, back into my general contractors who were like, we were accounting for this. Now it's totally shifted. So that becomes part of this too, in terms of that delivery process, because again, data centers and digital infrastructure moves at a very different pace.
So how often are you guys on the board getting together? Is this a quarterly conversation you guys are having? Is this talk to me a little bit about the iMason function in the Climate Accord? How often and how are you moving the industry?
Yeah, the governing body actually meets biweekly. So every 2 weeks they meet, as do our working groups. So our working groups meet every 2 weeks too. They also, I have a group chat with a handful of them. So, we often chat and have conversations very often. The working group chairs and I meet right now almost on a weekly cadence too. So that translation from what is the governing body talking about in leadership? How do we engage the volunteer leadership in the working groups? So those chairs and I get together on a very frequent basis. And then obviously with all the events and things coming up, we find time to have meetings, get together next week. Yada conference is coming up.
Sure. Right.
The morning program, very fortunate that the Yada team gave us the responsibility / the privilege of hosting a number of sessions. So we'll be featuring our governing body members on different panels, talking about the issues that you and I are talking about today, but just in a larger, broader context, getting some of the other members into the room and having discussions. So we talk about this as much as we can. They all have full-time jobs. So, it's as much as I would love to talk to Lex Kors from Digital Realty every single day. Lex is great. So many insights. Lex is a busy man. Noah from Google is a busy man. Anna from Schneider Electric, busy woman. So the fact that they give me and give the ICA so much time just speaks to the passion that they have and really the commitment that they have to this work. I am the sole employee effectively of the Climate Accord. I have a bench though of give or take 70 some odd, leaders in the industry coming to the table week in and week out giving me insights, making edits, telling me, no, this is wrong, no, this is right. How do we do this? I mean, culmination of that, if I use an example this year, is we released a maturity model for the industry, kind of a bit of a roadmap and guidelines for ICA members and larger digital infrastructure players to look at the various topics that we hone in on and how can they mature? What are the things that, their peers, their leaders are indicating to them as really critical areas for us to decarbonize, where the source power is coming from, how we're looking at, again, the metrics of how we determine the greener, the cleaner versions of our materials, of our equipment, et cetera. And that's been a 3-year labor of love, including 3 rounds of comment periods, including the governing body going back into it, including, 600 some odd comments in the first round and us addressing every single one of them. And again, I can't stress enough, these are volunteers. These are people doing this. I don't want to say the goodness of their heart, but really what drives them to get up every morning and come to the table. So it comes from that, all of this comes from their, mojo to be here.
Yeah. Miranda, you mentioned working groups. Can you give me an example, a name or two, just so I can conceptually understand what is a iMason Climate Accord working group? What are some of their titles or missions or charters?
Yeah. So we were talking about power. So let's talk about power. Our power working group chair is Mike Donahue of Oklo, and our vice chair is Tom Quinn from Google. So, those are the two balancing out that. But I mean, again, we have SEBA involved in that. We have Inio Genbacker involved, Ramble, so coming from more of the AEC side. We've got somebody like Greenscale involved, Digital Realty, so looking at the colo facilities, Enchanted Rock. Pete DeSanto from Enchanted Rock sits on there. Dorothy McGuire from Deloitte. You can see it's just this very massive cross section of folks involved. Casey Mayers, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Casey at Megawatt Consulting, what he brings to the table. Austin from Strive by SDX, Huey from Crusoe. So you get it. We really built out kind of a multi-dimensional working group so that any question is not a bad question or a question that's off the table. It's really, if I don't get this and I'm trying to go back and sell or talk about the work we're doing, then nobody's going to get it. And what they dive into, as we've already said, is kind of how the industry share best practices. How do we transition to a greener, low carbon future? How do we really encourage the development of the innovative technologies and energy optimization? And so again, that's why we've done a lot of hard work to understand, and we're doing it again this year. Who's missing from that table? Who do we need to get involved? Where, we don't have somebody who's on a solar company, for example, right? Is that a space that really needs to be present? How do we get them involved? How do we get them engaged? And again, the working groups did that exercise 2 years ago. We did a survey. We went through it. Are we missing stuff geographically? Are we missing stuff technically? Are we missing seniority versus somebody new to the market in the space? So they help craft a lot of what goes into play, not only out of their work product, but really who's in the conversations to ensure it goes far and wide and not just stays, okay, it's only hyperscalers talking about this.
You mentioned the technology as one of the pillars. I've heard people talk about GPUs a little bit lately, and just a little. Occasionally, somebody mentions something about AI. How are you guys looking at again? Talk about pace of change, man. We went from, hey, a rack has got 7-8 kilowatts to, hey, could you figure out how to get a megawatt in a rack? A megawatt? What? So the equipment is the technology, the processors, the equipment, meaning inside the rack, is changing rapidly. How do you guys, who's involved with you there, and how are you guys thinking about that?
Oh man, how can you not think about it? And yet at the same time, maybe my argument would be equipment in that space is even more challenging than the power conversation, because you have equipment that might be 1,000 component parts. Talk about a place that, how do you figure out the environmental footprint of that? Yeah, that's going to be somebody's full-time job. Some of the work that the equipment working group does, and very similarly, they have a vast cross-section of players that are involved there. It's chaired by Alex Rakow from Schneider Electric, co-chaired by Louis Liu from Relco, but Origina is involved, Grundfos is involved, ABB, again, Global Electronics Council. So again, another one of those strategic alliances that we have when we're talking about this. Nalco Water, okay, what's going on in water use, processed water, cooling, et cetera. And then companies like an HED. So what's coming from the engineering side of the table, or architecture side, excuse me, from there. One of the biggest successes out of that group is a partnership, an alliance that we have with the Open Compute Foundation, so OCP. And the first work stream out of that is to really look at, I guess, maybe another one of the first elements of the climate accord, which is a carbon disclosure label or carbon disclosure project. So we have a work stream there. We have 4 leaders, 2 from the ICA side, 2 from the Open Compute side, who have been working over the last year and a half, 2 years to understand what a carbon disclosure label would look like. And I can't say more about it today, but if those who listen to this and are at Open Compute's Global Summit in October, we have some pretty exciting announcements in terms of that work stream as to where we believe this is going to go, and actually some opportunities for various companies on both sides of those organizations, our organization and Open Compute, to now start delivering kind of on that promise of a carbon disclosure label. What's the first step of it?
Am I going to be reading compute labels like I read labels on my food? Is that where we're going?
I don't know if you're going to be reading the labels, but you might see indicators. You might see, a little icon.
There will be
perhaps
signs. All right.
Something like that.
Heart
that
friendly,
you'll be able to,
environment friendly.
Well, exactly. Gotcha. And that makes it easier. Like, you've got to have, let's use the food example. It's got to be digestible, because if you have to sit there and read every single ingredient, come on, nobody's doing that. But if you see that little thing that says, if you're a vegan and it's a V, or kosher and it's a K, like, all right, it's been certified. There's something there. Yeah. So yes, we are very excited about where this project has gone. And again, the announcements that'll be made in October Global Summit around that work. And again, that is coming from the Equipment Working Group, understanding where the bottlenecks are and how do we break through those bottlenecks, something along those lines, where, again, I've hinted at, will be coming front and center for our equipment.
Now, I think some people might be amazed that we have covered both of mine in your time in elementary school, your global travels, surfing, the architecture. We've covered power generation, green energy, the technology that goes inside data centers, and we've covered a lot. We mentioned Yada, which is next week when we're recording this. I can't talk about Yada without shout out to my friend, multiple guest, George Rocket. Love George. George, love you, brother. Yeah, he's such a good one. And yes. All right, so tell me something that we didn't think to chat about that you want to cover before we jet off to Vegas for Yada next week.
That we didn't chat about. Wow, that's always a good open question. Wide open.
Did we covered football on camera or off camera? I can't remember. But I'm always.
I think we covered a little bit of it when we talked about Ohio. Yes,
yeah, a little bit. All right.
And I do love football beyond Ohio too. I'm a born and raised there in
Ohio State.
The Ohio State. Excuse me.
That one's for you. That one's for you. Yeah, that way he'll be happy when you get home. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can see. Look, like my earpods are red. I mean, like
the red earpods was a giveaway.
Yeah, I'm rocking the color here.
Miranda Gardiner, thank you so much for hanging out with us and talking a little bit about digital infrastructure. Thank you for what you do from an industry perspective to make us aware of how we're impacting the planet. I mean, we want to provide digital infrastructure to everybody. We want to do it in the most responsible way possible. I mean, I got grandkids. I know it's hard to believe. I have grandkids, and I care about what they're going to live in when I'm not here anymore. So thank you for chatting with us. Have a great time at Yada, and we hope we get to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for really a wonderful dialogue, and appreciate your final comments there. It is something that's for everyone, this planet. And so how do we do it responsibly? Well, a lot of opportunity to move forward. So thanks.
Here. Thank you.